We are starting today's deep dive with some blunt, pretty unavoidable math. I want you to really think about this number. If you live to be 72 years old, which is roughly the global average life expectancy, you only get about 3,700 weeks on this planet.
That is a terrifying number when you hear it out loud like that.
Right. That is it, 3,700. And if you are 30 years old right now, you have already spent 1,500 of them. Time is running out, and it's running out a lot faster than our brains are, wired to comprehend. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Today, we are looking at a stack of incredibly provocative excerpts from a book called The Art of Laziness by Library Mindset. And our mission today is to zero in on the mindset portion of this text and explore a central, pretty uncompromising theme.
Which is why the ultimate and perhaps only cure for procrastination is taking 100% absolute responsibility for your life.
Exactly. And what stands out immediately in these excerpts is how the author just totally dismantles the illusions we build around our own time. I mean, we tend to operate as if time is infinite.
We really do. But presenting it as a finite mathematical reality, those 3,700 weeks, it forces a completely different perspective. When you look at your life as this dwindling bank account of weeks, you inevitably start to question how you are spending that currency.
Yeah, like, are you spending it on pursuits you actually value?
Right. Or are you spending it with people you care about? Or are you passively letting the weeks drain away while you scroll through your phone? The core argument here is that if you don't take total unvarnished responsibility for how you spend those remaining weeks, you are essentially pre-ordering a future filled with profound regret.
And that brings us to a quote the text highlights from Winston Churchill. The price of greatness is responsibility.
That's a heavy one.
It is. Library Mindset uses this idea to systematically strip away the most common excuses we use to justify inaction. The book makes the case that it is completely useless to blame anyone or anything else for your lack of progress. But I want to pause here and unpack the psychology of that, because we all do it.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone does.
Why do we default to blaming our friends or our family, the economy, or our jobs when things aren't moving forward?
Well, it comes down to ego protection. Blaming outside forces is an incredibly effective defense mechanism because it comforts us.
Lets us off the hook.
Exactly. When you blame a situation or another person, it sends a clear signal to your brain. It says, this isn't my fault. I am off the hook. Therefore, I don't need to do the hard work of changing.
Right.
Let's look at a relatable, everyday scenario. Say you want to get in shape, but you never actually make it to the gym. It is remarkably easy to blame a demanding boss, right?
Oh yeah, the demanding boss is the classic scapegoat.
You tell yourself, my manager overworks me, the company culture is toxic, I'm too stressed, I simply don't have the time or energy to exercise.
But then, if you were to actually audit your time, like literally track every minute of your day, you might find something else.
You might find you are still managing to find 3 uninterrupted hours every single evening to binge watch television or fall down a social media rabbit hole.
The demanding boss just hides the uncomfortable truth.
Precisely. The time exists, but you are choosing not to prioritize the difficult task. Acknowledging that requires you to take a hit to your ego. It requires you to admit, I have the time, I am just choosing to be lazy.
The book is exceptionally blunt about this dynamic. It lays out what it calls the harsh truths of life. And I'm just going to read them directly from the source. It says, if you're lazy, it's your fault. If you're unhappy, it's your fault. If you're a procrastinator, it's your fault.
Those are tough pills to swallow.
They really are. And I want to push back on this a little bit. Isn't that somewhat reductive? What about legitimate systemic barriers? If someone is working 3 minimum wage jobs just to keep a roof over their head, isn't it a bit detached from reality to just say, well, if you're unhappy, it's your fault?
That is a crucial distinction to make. And we have to be clear here. The text isn't arguing that systemic issues, tragedy, or bad luck don't exist. Of course they do. And they are incredibly difficult.
So how did the book draw the line between making excuses and acknowledging those real, tangible barriers?
What the author is focusing on is your locus of control. The book draws a line between the things you cannot control, like the economy or a health crisis or where you were born, and the things you absolutely can control, which is your response to those circumstances.
Meaning, even if a situation is genuinely not your fault, it is still your responsibility to figure out how to navigate it.
Exactly. The moment you use a legitimate barrier as an excuse to completely stop trying, you hand over all your agency to that barrier.
Which ties into a reality the author points out that sounds honestly incredibly cynical at first, but is actually deeply liberating. The Nobody cares reality.
Yes, the nobody cares reality. It's so true.
Because nobody actually cares if you exercise or procrastinate.
Nobody is losing sleep over whether or not you are achieving your potential. The world is not going to suddenly intervene, pause its own chaos, and save you from your bad habits.
Everyone else's life is their own messy priority.
And when we complain about our circumstances, we aren't changing the outcome. Complaining just fills the mind with worry and negative thoughts. Overthinking and complaining degrade your mental bandwidth without moving you a single inch closer to your goals. The only thing that moves the needle is taking ownership.
So practically speaking, taking ownership means going to war with the ultimate enemy of growth, which is the comfort zone. The text notes that a comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. It is incredibly easy to just watch TV or read the news all day.
Very easy.
But there is a fascinating internal conflict that happens when we do this. I'll admit to a personal habit here. When I have a looming deadline for a major project, suddenly, scrubbing the baseboards in my house becomes the most urgent thing in the world.
Oh, productive procrastination.
Exactly. But even while I'm doing it, or if I'm just sitting on the couch avoiding work entirely, there is this lingering heavy sense of guilt. Why does the comfort zone feel so uncomfortable beneath the surface?
What you are describing is the friction between your short-term neurobiology and your long-term values. To understand why procrastination feels both good and terrible at the same time, we have to look at how the brain processes rewards.
Okay, let's break that down.
Laziness or avoidance behaviors provide an immediate hit of dopamine. Throughout human evolution, our brains were wired to conserve energy whenever possible because calories were scarce. So sitting still and doing nothing, or doing an easy repetitive task like cleaning baseboards instead of complex cognitive work, feels safe and rewarding to the primitive parts of your brain.
But the modern world doesn't operate on those primitive rules anymore.
Precisely. Today, that dopamine system is easily hijacked by things like social media. But while your limbic system, the emotional primitive part of your brain, is enjoying the cheap dopamine, your prefrontal cortex, the logical part that plans for the future, knows you are avoiding something meaningful.
So that guilt you feel is literally your prefrontal cortex screaming at you.
It is your internal system recognizing that you are sacrificing a long-term goal for short-term relief.
And that dynamic is perfectly captured in one of the book's core mantras. Hard choices equal an easy life. Easy choices equal a hard life.
It is a brilliant framework. Sitting on the couch is an easy choice in the moment. But what is the long-term result of making that easy choice every day for a decade?
Poor health, a lack of energy, stalled career growth.
And deep dissatisfaction. Going to the gym or sitting down to write that difficult proposal is a hard choice. It requires effort, friction, and discomfort in the short term. But the long-term result of those hard choices is an easier life. You have more energy, greater financial stability, and a stronger, more resilient mindset.
The book is basically asking you to weigh the costs. Being unhealthy or unfulfilled is far harder in the long run than the temporary discomfort of a workout or a tough work session.
To make that concrete, the text asks the reader to utilize a visualization exercise. Picture your 80-year-old self for a moment, looking back on your life. Will that 80-year-old regret the temporary discomfort of trying something new, of pushing through a hard workout or starting a challenging project and failing?
No. They are going to regret wasting their youth, sitting around, waiting for good things to just happen automatically.
And that connects directly to the most universal, sneaky excuse of all time, the illusion of the perfect time.
Oh, I hate how relatable this is.
We tell ourselves we're just waiting for life to settle down before we write that book or start that company or finally get our finances in order.
Absolutely. I'll start the business when the economy is better. I'll travel when work slows down. The author completely dismantles this and drops an incredible quote from Pablo Picasso to drive the point home. Only put off until tomorrow what you're willing to die having left undone.
It is a stark way to frame it, but it establishes the exact level of urgency the author is trying to instill. Let's analyze how this perfect time myth actually plays out in the real world. The assumption is that the future contains some magical clearing where you will have abundant energy, zero distractions, and perfect financial security.
But life never actually settles down.
There is always going to be a crisis, always a busy season at work, always an unexpected expense or a family obligation. If you wait for the stars to perfectly align, you will wait forever. The perfect time is a total myth. In fact, if you wait until conditions feel perfect, you have almost certainly waited too long.
The book actually brings in a concept from Jeff Bezos to back this up, which I think is one of the most actionable frameworks in the entire text. It is his 70% rule.
I love this rule.
The premise is that most decisions should be made when you have about 70% of the information you wish you had. If you wait until you have 90% or 100% of the information, you are probably moving way too slowly.
The 70% rule is a perfect antidote to analysis paralysis. Let's dig into why waiting for 90% is so detrimental. It comes down to the law of diminishing returns. Getting from 0 to 70% of the information you need to start a project might take you a week. It is fast, efficient research. But trying to close that gap and get from 70% to 90% certainty, that might take you 3 months of agonizing over details, running endless scenarios, and second-guessing yourself.
And by the time you've spent those 3 months gathering data, the opportunity might be gone entirely, or the market might have changed.
Exactly. The time cost of gathering that last 20% of information is almost always worse than the risk of making a decision and being slightly wrong. The book advocates for jumping in, knowing your plan isn't perfect, and trusting your ability to adjust course as you go. Speed and action are vastly more important than flawless preparation.
Library mindset makes a really sharp distinction here about patience. We're often told to be patient, but the text argues we apply that patience to the wrong things. You should be patient with the results, but impatient with your actions.
That is a profound shift in perspective. Too many people get it entirely backward. They want instant results from minimal, highly delayed action.
They want the promotion after 1 month of working hard, but they procrastinate on starting the actual project.
The reality of any worthwhile endeavor is that the work takes time to yield a reward. The compounding effect of your efforts might not be visible for months or years. Because the results require patience, your actions cannot. You have to start the work immediately. You have to be aggressive and urgent about taking the first step today, precisely because the payoff is so far in the future.
That urgency to act and the absolute necessity of taking personal ownership ties perfectly into a classic fable the author uses to illustrate self-reliance. It is the story of a mother sparrow and a farmer.
This is such a great story to encapsulate everything we've been talking about.
I'll summarize the text version of it quickly because the implications are what really matter here. A sparrow makes her nest in a wheat field. One day, the farmer says he will send his sons to harvest the wheat tomorrow. The sparrow ignores this and tells her babies they are safe.
She doesn't budge.
A few days later, the farmer says his sons failed, so he will hire laborers to harvest the field. Again, the sparrow ignores the threat and stays put. Finally, the farmer realizes no one else is going to do it and declares he will harvest the wheat himself the next morning. It is only at this point that the sparrow immediately packs up and flees with her babies.
The book uses this to make a brilliant point about the difference between delegating tasks and delegating ownership. As long as the farmer was relying on others, his sons, the hired laborers, the work was simply never going to get done. He was delegating his own ultimate responsibility.
The sparrow knew that.
The mother sparrow, operating purely on survival instincts, understood human nature better than the farmer did. She knew that people who rely on others to do their most important critical tasks rarely see them completed.
The threat wasn't real until the farmer took 100% responsibility.
Precisely. Success, and in the case of the sparrows, real danger, only materialized when the farmer became entirely self-reliant. When he essentially said, "I will do it myself, my success rests entirely on my own shoulders," the dynamic fundamentally changed from passive hoping to active execution. The text takes the core lesson of this fable and uses it to categorize people into 3 distinct types that we see in the modern professional world.
Right, it breaks down the population based on how they react to friction and responsibility.
The first type represents the vast majority of people. They never even start. They are the ones endlessly waiting for the perfect time. They sit in their comfort zones, they succumb to the daily friction of laziness, and they just wait around hoping a stroke of luck or a benevolent mentor will magically appear and hand them success.
That is the farmer on day 1, hoping his sons will just handle it so he doesn't have to sweat.
Then you have the second type of people. These are the ones who do gather the courage to start. They make the initial hard choice. But the absolute second things get complicated, or they hit an unforeseen obstacle, they fold, they quit, they blame the economy or their boss or bad luck, and then they spend the rest of their lives living with the quiet regret of not seeing it through.
And the third type?
The third type is the 1%. These are the individuals who put in the work, who absolutely refuse to give up despite the inevitable hardships, and who keep adjusting their approach. But most importantly, they refuse to depend on anyone else to save them or do the heavy lifting for them. They operate with the mindset of the farmer on the third day, taking the scythe into his own hands. They understand the 3,700 weeks math. They take 100% responsibility for their trajectory, and they are the ones who ultimately build the lives they want.
Let's pull all of these insights together, because we have covered some seriously challenging ground today, exploring the mindset of the art of laziness. We started with the mathematical reality that our time is painfully finite. We explored why the comfort zone feels safe, but secretly breeds guilt, because our brains know we are sacrificing long-term fulfillment for cheap, short-term dopamine.
We examined the 70% rule and shattered the myth of the perfect time, proving that waiting for a complete certainty is just a sophisticated form of procrastination.
And through the fable of the farmer and the sparrow, we saw that relying on outside forces to care about your goals is a guaranteed path to failure. The takeaway is clear. You have to escape the comforting illusion of your excuses and embrace the hard choices today so you can actually build an easier, more fulfilling life tomorrow.
And this brings us to the most critical point for you, the listener. Taking in this information, analyzing these psychological frameworks with us, it is a great first step. But as the text repeatedly emphasizes, knowledge without execution is worse than useless. It's just another form of procrastination.
It changes nothing.
You can understand the neurobiology of laziness. You can memorize the Jeff Bezos 70% rule. But if you do not change your daily actions, absolutely nothing shifts in your reality. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to force you to prioritize your own dreams. The power to overcome the friction of your comfort zone rests entirely in your own hands. You have to be the one to harvest the field.
To leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day, return to that visualization we discussed earlier. Imagine your 80-year-old self could somehow travel back in time right now.
They walk into your room, sit down next to you on the couch, and quietly observe how you choose to spend your next 24 hours.
They watch your habits, your distractions, the difficult conversations you avoid, and the tasks you keep putting off. If they could lean over and speak to you, what is the very first excuse they would beg you to drop? Think about it.